Welcome everybody on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern and I work with our education department at the museum. And this morning is our first weekly Friday Survivors Talk. We've been doing them on Thursdays, but this summer we will be doing them Fridays at 11 o'clock. And thank you everybody for joining. And this early afternoon, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Angelina Belawa, a Holocaust survivor from Germany who will share her story with you. Afterwards, you'll have the opportunity to ask her questions. Those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box, and those watching on Facebook can use the comments, and we'll answer as many as possible. Before we get started, I'd like to share a quick history of the museum. Our museum was founded in the 1960s by a group of Holocaust survivors who met in Los Angeles and decided they wanted to create a space to commemorate their loved ones and to a space where people could always learn the history of the Holocaust. Their mission then, and still to this day, the museum's mission has always been to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. We are also happy to announce that the museum is open now in person, and visitors who are interested in visiting the museum, you can go to our website, holocaustmuseumla.org, and you can learn there how to reserve a space. You will need to reserve, it's time ticketing, and you'll have to reserve a space, but we're happy to say that we are open now in person, and we are still doing Zoom programs as well. And in the meantime, while we do not have in-person survivor talks at the museum, it is our honor to continue these regular programs on Zoom. Angelina, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
You may begin.
Okay. My name is Angelina Belawa. I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1927. We lived in an apartment house. We were the only Jews, but we had no problem. I had an older brother and an older sister, and our parents were handicapped. They couldn't speak and they couldn't hear. So I learned sign language very early in my life. While my brother and sister went to work when they were older, I would go with my parents to any office they had to go to and would talk for them. Everything was all right until 1933, when Hitler came to power, and he made no secret what his plan was to destroy Jews. He came up with all kinds of laws, but he pictured Jews with dark hair and long noses. Now my family, I'm sure we were not the only ones, were blonde and blue-eyed, so we could get away with things until 1938, when they started really to punish, or I don't know if the word punish is the right word, but to work against us. I went to public school for 2 years. After 2 years, I was thrown out because I was the only Jew. And I was sent to a Jewish girls' school, which was quite a walk, 45-minute walk. My mother would walk with me and pick me up from school. Across from our school was a regular school, and those pupils there would insult us, call us names. In the winter, they would cover rocks with snow and throw it at us. But, you know, we got used to all of that too. Until November 9th, 1938, famous Kristallnacht. I walked to school and I had to walk through some Jewish business neighborhoods. In front of the stores were the brown shirts. The windows were all broken. The merchandise was thrown in the street. And they were screaming, "Don't buy from Jews." And I got to school. We were told that all synagogues in Germany had been set on fire. All religious items were thrown in the street, set on fire, and books written by Jewish authors. After that, the school explained that to us. We were, of course, sent home, and our troubles began. We were forbidden to go in a park, sit on the bench, go to the movies, and we were not allowed to use public transportation. In 1939, they made us wear the yellow star. So that, of course, limited us for everything, even that we didn't look Jewish. In the beginning of 1940, they started deportations. They came with big moving vans and took whole families away. First, we didn't know, but you know, rumor starts and you find out that they were all sent to Poland, and most of them were killed. Our turn was in 1942, September. Two Gestapo men came to our apartment in the middle of the night, told us to take a few things and come with them. They took us by public transportation to one of the biggest synagogues that was still standing. When we entered, we saw that the inside was destroyed and there was 1,000 people sitting on their luggage. All kinds of people, old people, young people, invalids, all kinds of people. On the stage were sitting the SS men and women. When we entered, they called my sister and me and asked us, maybe you have a relative that is not Jewish or half Jewish. And we said, no, we are 100% Jewish. So they put us into the inside of the temple, sitting on our luggage. We never got anything to eat or to drink. After 3 days, they took 1,000 Jews marching through the city of Berlin to a railway station. Germans were standing on the sidewalks on the way, screaming, clapping. Oh, we finally get rid of the Jews. We came to a railway station and we were put on a train. I was 15 years old So my knowledge of wasn't where we're going, I had no idea. But the grown-ups after a while said, oh, it looks like we're not going to Poland. Maybe that's not so bad after all. The train continued and stopped in Riga, which is the capital of Latvia. We knew that there's a ghetto, and we thought, no, maybe it's not that bad. But the train stopped. They took out 10 men, shot them right in front of us, and the train continued. On October 1st, the train stopped. We were told we are in Estonia on an open field. We were chased off the train and told to stand in line. On the head, the SS men and women, and they would decide, you go right, you go left. From the 1,000 people, they told 800 to go one side and 200, including my sister and me, to the other side. But we knew that our parents don't understand what's going on, and we saw they put them on a bus. So we ran to the bus, and we were sitting on the bus. SS followed us, started screaming. We told you, you have to stay behind, you have to clean the station. And we said, no, we have to be with our parents. And they said, oh, don't worry, you'll meet them later. But we never met our parents and the 800 other people again. The rest of us, we were supposed to clean the station. We met 3 other girls who went through the same thing we did. And right away, we decided we stick together to keep each other. We cleaned the station. It wasn't really a station, it was the middle of nowhere. After we cleaned, we were marched quite a way to an open field with 2 barracks. We were pushed into the barrack. It was plain, nothing there, just a wooden floor. So my sister and the 3 girls decided right then, we stick together, we sleep together to keep warm. The next morning, they brought us old bread and water, and then told us to come outside. When we were outside, they told us to go to the second barrack, which had the luggage of all the 1,000 people. We had to unpack and sort. People had good stuff, warm stuff, even food. But you couldn't take anything because if they found something on you, they would kill you right on the spot. So we worked on that for a couple of weeks. In the meantime, they always had sessions where they picked people. First, we didn't realize what for, but pretty soon we found out that they picked them to kill. From the 200 women, we were only 100 left. And one day, they just put us on a bus in the middle of the night and drove us to Tallinn, which is the capital of Latvia. No, it's the capital of Estonia. When we arrived there, in the middle of the night, we heard that we must be near the ocean because we heard the water. And they took us into a real old-fashioned prison. We had to go through some dark hallways until we came to a little more modern. There were lights, 100 women. We had to stay in line, and then they would pick 10, push you into a room until they had all 110 rooms. Then the lights went on and we saw we were in a prison cell. One toilet and one little sink. Against the wall, they had 7 beds. So we told the older ladies, they can have the beds and 3 young ones will sleep on the floor. During the night, they would open the cell door to check on us. In the morning, they brought us raw fish. Nowadays, it's a delicacy. I still don't like it. After we had to make sure the cell is clean, they took us down to the backyard. We saw a German man. He told us he represents a German construction company. We are going to work for them. We're going to get an extra suit. But if one runs away, 10 will be shot. So they marched us to the city of Tallinn, to a shipyard, which was in bad shape. We assumed that the Russians and the Germans had been fighting there. So we had to clean up all the rubble that was there. German soldiers worked there too, because it was near the ocean and the ships were there. Every morning when they walked in, they would sing, "We can't wait for all the Jews to be killed." We had to listen to it, but there was nothing we could do. We worked on that shipyard to clean up. When we were almost finished, we were divided into groups. Each group was headed by a German civilian. Some had to work for divers, some had to clean up different things, clean the roads, all kinds. Our group was selected to learn bricklaying. The man who taught us bricklaying was the only German in all these years who was decent to us. As a matter of fact, after the state of Israel, after the war, we recommended this German man there, and he was honored. So he taught us bricklaying, but before that, we had to unload the train with bricks, cement, all kinds of stuff that you need for bricklaying. And we started bricklaying. Then it went on for a couple of weeks. And one day, they didn't let us out of prison again. We never knew what it is. They put us again on a train and took us further in near the Russian border into a big concentration camp. It was called Engelina. It was already full men and women. There were never any children. They were killed immediately wherever they found them. And had, of course, always SS men and women. The men and women always separated. Around the whole camp were always electric wires. If you touched it, you killed yourself. Some people tried and died. We were sent to do hard work outside, like building a railroad, cleaning the streets, cutting, digging traps for the German soldiers. It was hard work. And at night they brought us back to the camp. We had very little food. The head were only as men and women. And when we came back from work, they would always count and would give us speeches that they needed us to work. But in the end, they were going to get rid of all the Jews. This went on for a while until we had the shipyard in pretty good shape. And they took us again on a train, never on a regular train, closer to the Russian border to another concentration camp. We were there again, no medical care, no shower. The worst situation you can be. They had great fun, they had great fun sending the German shepherds toward us, biting or just scaring us. We stayed there again for a while and they decided they want to build another concentration camp nearby. So again, they took the group that learned bricklaying and took us to another camp, which was brand new. We had to build the chimneys in the barracks, fireplaces for the SS quarters, and then again, they brought men and women, mostly Eastern European, Czech or German Jews. Again, we worked hard there. Again, hardly any food, no medical care, no shower, no toilets. But we had no choice. We had to do what we were told to do. Apparently, the war became a little more difficult for the Germans, so they decided to take us back to Germany. It was already 1944. So we had been in camps already for 2 years. They took us back to Tallinn, where the ship was, but they needed a ship for German soldiers to go back. So they just dropped us off near the ship on an empty field. Nothing there, just a plain ground, no blankets, nothing. We were on that field for 3 weeks. Luckily, it never rained. After 3 weeks, they finally had the ship. They loaded us on the ship on the bottom, of course, and the SS on top. The ship left. The SS would come down once a day, look who had died or who they thought was too sick to make the trip. So they took these people and threw them into the ocean. After a couple of days, the ship stopped near another concentration camp called Stutthof. They unloaded us from the big ship on the little ones down the river to this Stutthof Concentration Camp. Before we entered, they took away the clothes and gave us rags. They shaved our heads, and we came into this concentration camp. We didn't have to work. We were just standing around all day, no matter what the weather was like. And at night, they pushed us into a barrack. But the barrack was too small. We were 100 women. Well, it's too small for us to sit down to sleep. So we had to teach ourselves to sleep standing up. Many nights they would come with a pail of cold water, throw it over us, tell us that's your shower. Still wet the next morning, we were standing outside again all day. Then a few German farmers came, picked some women to work for them. You never saw any of these women again. My sister and the 3 other girls, we made sure that whoever they pick, that we stick together. There were always sessions where they picked people. First we didn't know, but then we realized they always picked them to be killed. One time they picked me too, and then they asked for volunteers. So of course my sister volunteered and the 3 other girls too. And we don't know what happened. They took the 5 of us out and put 5 other women to their deaths. So we were in this concentration camp for a while. The farmers came pick up women, and one day another German came and picked a bigger group to work in a factory near Hamburg. We knew that near Hamburg was another concentration camp, Neuengamme. So we just made sure that the 5 girls and other women stuck together, and by train they took us to Hamburg, Germany, to work in a ammunition factory. They didn't take us to this concentration camp there. It was not convenient for the factory. They built a small concentration camp near the family, near the factory. And we worked 12-hour shifts. My sister and I were on separate shifts, so we didn't see each other for a while. But bombing started, and we still had to go to the factory. But when the bombing became harder, was already toward the end of 1944, they decided they give up this camp and take us to another concentration camp. Again, they put us on a train and we went to a small town. When the train stopped, we saw many people lying dead on the station. Some weren't able to walk or anything, so they would shoot them right away. They took us 100 women marching through the city the small towns. Germans were standing out there. They didn't say anything. Our group was leading the German SS woman. We saw smoke and we asked, what is that? And she said, oh, that's where you will end up because we are going to make soap out of you. We came to the gates of the camp Bergen Belsen. Now we had been in several, each one worse than the other, but you had never seen anything like the concentration camp Bergen Belsen. The SS was still around there. They all wore white armbands. We didn't know what it meant. The camp was surrounded by mostly Hungarian young men who kept on shooting whoever they felt like it. We had to work. We had to pick up dead bodies and put them into piles. That was our work. We hardly got any food. Forget about medical care or anything. We hardly had anything to eat. Luckily, it was already the end of 1944. On April 15th, 1945, we saw a big truck. We didn't know what it meant. Turned out to be the British Army. They were shocked what they found. They never expected dead bodies, sick bodies lying around. And they were not prepared. They gave us army rations, and thousands of people died because their stomach couldn't take it. And there was a typhus disease in the camp. The British and Swedish doctors decided they have to give up the camp and burn it down because it's full of disease. So they selected the group that was able to get out of there. Many people went back to the country they came from, but we decided, we knew from the beginning that we will never stay in Germany again. The British, and they burned down the camp, and they took a group of us next door to the Kaserne where the SS had lived. Again, they put us by nationality into rooms. And luckily, my sister and I and the three girls were always together. Finally, we could take a bath. We finally had a toilet for ourselves, and the organizations brought us food. The British doctors went from room to find out who was sick. Now in our room, I was sick and one of my girlfriends. And by the way, my sister had typhus already still while we were in prison, in prison, but nobody knew about it. So this way she was saved. So the doctors took us, the people that were sick, to the not barracks, really, Kaserne, made it hospitals, and took people there. My sister didn't know, she couldn't follow the ambulance, so she didn't know where I was. So she went from house to house until she found me. But I was too sick, they wouldn't let her in. After 3 weeks, I was a little better, so the girls would push me against the window so my sister could see that I'm still alive. A couple of weeks later, my sister came and told the doctors she's going to take me for a walk. She took me out and she never brought me back to the hospital. The British had opened a displaced person camp nearby. She took me there. Lots of people from all over came looking for relatives, anybody knew. We knew we wouldn't find anybody. Among these people that came was a man my sister knew from Berlin. He was always a leader in a Jewish youth organization. He's the first person who told us about Auschwitz. All these years, we had no idea of Auschwitz. He told us that he was sent there with thousands of others with his family. His wife and young child were selected with the big group to be gassed. He and a few other young men were sent next door to work in a factory. It turned out that factory was IG Farben. That's one that produced the gas for gas chambers. After the war, they sued them and they won. But that we can bring back the dead people. So we lived in this displaced person camp. The British and Swedish, they were really very nice to us. One day, a young man came that my sister knew. He told us about Auschwitz. And after a few months, my sister and him got married. He always became very, very active in survivor problems. And after he got married to my sister, they decided they're sick and tired of living camp style. They want to live a little more normal before they can leave for America. That was our wish, to go to the United States. So we moved to a small town near Hamburg, Lübeck. The Germans gave us a house which was previously owned by a Jewish family that didn't come back. We moved into this house. They gave us furniture and all the things you need to live. And other survivors came. We all became friendly. We celebrated any occasion. One day, my sister was invited to people that she knew from before the war. And she came back and she said, oh, they live in a house with a backyard, a really normal life. And one day we told her, look, we are not able to do that yet. And one day an American soldier came and said, we live in another city. We Americans are leaving and the Russians are taking over. And he thought it's better to bring the busload of survivors to us, to the British zone, because Germany was then divided in British, American, French, and Russian. So of course, we agreed, and he brought a busload of survivors They were all put up in German homes. We all became friendly, like one big family. Among these people he brought was a man from Warsaw, Poland. He had a jewelry store in Warsaw. When the Germans invaded Poland on September 1st, 1942, they damaged his store. They beat him up. They stole some of his merchandise. Now he had a son, 16-year-old. So he told his 16-year-old son, try to run away because we don't know what's going to be. He gave him some watches, merchandise, and the 16-year-old ran away and landed in Siberia, never knowing what happened to his family. The Russians didn't tell them the war was over until 1946. Somehow, he found out that his father had survived. So he made his way to Germany, which was not easy. He stopped off in Poland, in Warsaw first, but he couldn't find anything there. So he made his difficult trip to Germany, to Lübeck. His father had remarried. His mother had died in the Warsaw ghetto. His father had remarried another survivor woman. She was also from Warsaw. So, and my father-in-law, practical man that he was, opened a little jewelry store right there. So they had a happy reunion. By then, the son was 21, and he lived with them. We had parties. We were dancing. He was a good dancer. And somehow he clicked. I didn't know what it meant. I was very naive. I was 18 after liberation and he was 20. So we continued dating, going out to movies. I hadn't been in movies in years. And in 1948, when the state of Israel was declared, they gave official papers to move to Israel. Now, his father's wish was always to be in Israel and to die and be buried in Israel. And that's also what happened. The son wanted to go too, but they told him, no, you can go illegal. Father said, no, you went through so much, you wait till you get official papers. So they left for Israel with the group, and he moved into the house with us. We continued dating, and on June 12, 1949, we got officially engaged. He knew that I would never separate from my sister and that their plan was to go to the United States. And there was no question that I go there too. So in the end of 1949, he said, you know, before we go to the United States, let's go to Israel. Let me see my father and other relatives that went there much before the war. So I agreed. And at the end of 49, we went to Israel. I can tell you the feeling you have after you were treated like nothing, like dirt. You arrive in a Jewish country. Then they had always somebody come on the plane, welcome you, which gives you a terrific feeling. And we lived with my father-in-law and his wife in Tel Aviv. And my husband saw all his relatives that he hadn't seen in years. And it became the end of 49. And we had to go back to Germany. So my father-in-law said, I know you want to go to the United States, but before that, let me at least have the pleasure to have your wedding here. I said, that's very nice, but I don't want to get married without my sister. She's the only one I have. It wasn't easy, but they managed. My sister came with her husband, a suitcase full of food and a dress for me. We got married on February 4th in Tel Aviv, Israel. Our guests were my husband's relative and all survivors that we knew. We couldn't go really sightseeing because it was still occupied a lot. So, and we had to go back to Germany. We went back to Germany and still there was no news from the United States. So my sister, my brother-in-law, my husband then, and we decided we go one time to Berlin. We went to Berlin, we went to the Jewish cemetery where my brother was buried. And we had the names of our parents engraved in his stone. So at least their name is somewhere. After that, we went to the apartment house we used to live. My sister refused, I didn't. I went up the floor where our apartment was, and I saw the next door neighbor is still the same. And I knew that she knew me from the day I was born, right next apartment from her. I rang her bell. She fainted when she saw me. I told her what her countrymen did to 6 million Jews, got it off my chest, went back down, and we went back. It was already the end of 1950. We finally got papers for the United States, but I was pregnant. And we were afraid we come to another country, we don't have insurance, we don't have money. So we decided we let the baby be born in Germany. So my son was born on April 27, 1951. When he was 6 weeks old, we got a special that we could fly to the United States. It was a military plane, only pregnant women, and they didn't have jet planes yet. So they stopped many, many times. Every time we stopped, I ran to the kitchen and made the formula for my baby. We arrived in New York on June 12th, and the weather is really unbearable, hot and humid. Oh, my baby cried bloody murder. The immigration officers let us out very, very fast. We came out. Some of our friends who had come before were there to welcome us. But they said they knew that we have not a plan, that the organization had a plan for us to go to Stockton, California. So they said, why do you want to go there? You don't know anybody. Stay here and we will help. And we decided they're right. So we lived with another survivor family in the Bronx on the 4th floor, no elevator, no air conditioning, but we didn't know any better anyway. Neighbors were all outstanding. They all organized for my husband to get a job as a watchmaker. And they were looking for an apartment for us. They finally found one in the same building on the ground floor. We were thrilled. The apartment was 1 bedroom, 1 living room. The wall on the living room was the kitchen. There was the refrigerator, there was a sink, and refrigerator, sink, and stove. Oh, we were thrilled with that. My husband worked as a watchmaker. I took care of the baby. A couple of weeks later, my sister came with 2 children and her husband. We all lived together in this small apartment. This American soldier advised my brother-in-law to go back to school and learn how to be an accountant. And my husband worked as a watchmaker. While both the husbands were gone, we took care of the children. The American soldier was very good to us. He was a lawyer by then, and he finally organized for us to get a house in Queens. All our friends stayed in Manhattan, and they were all upset. They couldn't, you had to use the bus, the subway, and a bus to come to visit. At first they said, no, we will never see you. But finally, they took the transportation to come to see us. Neighbors again were very, very nice. My husband got another job as a watchmaker. They had to go to Manhattan, pick up broken watches, bring them home, and he would repair, and I would bring the repaired watches back. Of course, I got lost on the subway many times, but I learned my lesson. And this is the way we worked until 1956. My husband said, I think it's time we have a home of our own. So we found a house nearby and we moved into our own home. Everybody was very nice, the neighbors and other survivors who lived around. We had really a very nice life. In 1957, I had another baby boy. We continued working. While I would make the deliveries, my husband would take care of the 2 children. This went on for a while. And my children grew up. They're 6 years apart. They went to public schools, high school. After my older son graduated high school, he said, I would like to take a course in California, UCLA. We said, okay. So he went to California, to UCLA, he graduated, he came back and said, I'd like to move to California. I like to live there. And we said, no, you have to finish college in New York first. So he finished NYU in New York, got married, and moved to California. My younger son also finished high school and wanted to go to college. And we said, no, you finish college in New York first. My sister died in the end of 1977 on a rare disease. And in the beginning of 78, he said, I want to go to school in California too. And I knew my sons were very close, that his brother would take care of him. So in the beginning of 78, I went with my younger son by car to Los Angeles. By then, my older son, already had a chiropractic office. So we went to see him. We had a happy reunion. I knew that my older son, would take care of the younger one. So I went back to New York. When I got to New York, we got a letter from both our sons. We are a smaller family. We should be together. And you should know your grandchildren, and your grandchildren should know you. We thought about it. Everybody said, oh, you're crazy if you do it. But we decided that we'll do. We sold our house and we sold our business, and we came cross country to LA, Culver City. We were thrilled being together with our sons. And we used to live with one of them for a while. And my husband said, yes, but now I have to try to find a job, but I don't want to be a watchmaker. So our son said, don't worry, we took care of that. You can be our office manager and mom can be the secretary. My husband said, with my English, I have to call insurance companies, patients. They said, don't worry. Insurance companies, their English is not that great. And private patients will learn to understand. So we became a team. For 16 years, we were working for our sons. My husband even picked up Spanish, so he had no problems talking to anybody. Both our sons had two sons, apparently boys run in the family, and they're all active in sports. We went to any sports event they took care of. We got our own home in Santa Monica, and we were thrilled that we are all together again. My second grandson fell in love with surfing. We never heard of that. And we said, what kind of a crazy sport is that? And we drove into beaches. He went out surfing. We couldn't wait for him to come back because it was already getting dark. But he became a champion surfer. Every morning before he went to school, he went surfing, but he always took somebody along. One day, a wave hit him. He was floating in the ocean, and first they thought he's joking, but then they realized It's serious. They fished him out. They rushed him to the hospital. The doctors all called us and told us that he broke his neck and that he will never walk again. Of course, we were all upset. He was in the hospital, and then he was all kinds of homes. But he finished high school. He even went to college in San Diego, always with a caregiver. And then he came back to LA. He rented an apartment with a caregiver. And he had this organization, Life Rolls On, and there are a lot of people who joined him, who help people in wheelchairs to come to the ocean and go surfing. So we all got used to this situation, but it was not easy. But we had to learn to live in more. Jesse really is terrific how he manages it. He's successful in his organization, Life Rolls On. About 6 years ago, he met a lady in the apartment house he used to live. They got married about 6, 7 years ago. We were all thrilled that he's not alone, but he needed a caregiver anyway. But we had a wonderful wedding, and we were thrilled that he's, having a more normal life. Unfortunately, 7 years ago, my husband died of cancer. A week after he was buried, I had a stroke. Luckily, there were visitors here. It's a Jewish custom to visit. One of them was a doctor, and he realized right away that I had a stroke. They called the ambulance and took me to the hospital. And after I was better, I came back to my apartment, and they decided I can live in my apartment because it has 2 floors. So they decided to take me to a assistant living in Santa Monica. I went there, and they were pretty nice there. I lived there for a couple of years. Luckily, before this terrible disease came up, my son took me out and took me into his house. He bought a house right next door to his son, Jesse. He took me into his house. I live with him. I have my own room. I have my own bathroom. And I have a caregiver. Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I have a different one. Then my son decided, you have a story to tell. And he took me to the Museum of Tolerance. I started speaking there to young students once a week, telling my story. But then they closed the museum. I also spoke in the other museum, they closed. So I speak via this at least once a week at each museum. They always have students listening. And this is the end of my story. I'm lucky that I live with my son. My other son doesn't live far away. He talked to him twice a day. On weekends, he comes to visit. And that is my life now. I guess I have to be happy the way it is. I'm not always happy, but I should be grateful. And here I am, Michael.
Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and sharing your story with us. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box on Zoom, or those watching on Facebook can use the comments. We do have a question. What was your husband's name and your kids' names?
My husband's first name was Richard. His story is on there too. And my older son, George, is named after my father. My second son is called Michael, named after my husband's mother, whose name was Malka.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So how old were you when you were in Bergen Belsen?
No, when I was arrested, I was 15. And when I was liberated, I was 18.
Thank you. And so you were liberated at Bergen Belsen. So you were about 18 when you arrived there.
After liberation. We were liberated in April, and my birthday is in July.
Thank you. Let's see, one of our audience members who grew up in the Bronx would like to know what neighborhood you lived in there.
In the Bronx, the West Bronx, I think.
West Bronx, thank you.
Near the some hospital, Kingsbridge.
Thank you very much. Did you know a lot of other Holocaust survivors when you were living in New York?
Oh yes, we belonged to a group, Bergen Belsen. There was a very big group, and of course we joined. And my husband being from Warsaw, they had a group too, so we belonged to that too.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What kept you so strong that you were able to keep going during all of these years during the Holocaust?
I was young, and my sister and my girlfriends, they kept me going.
Thank you. We have a comment from somebody who listened to your talk who says,
Okay.
After everything, you have a very gentle, positive view of life. And thank you.
I do.
And it's always so special when you share this with people at the museum. Before the pandemic, you used to come in person and share this positive view with students, and I was able to see this a lot. And so thank you for doing this on Zoom the last year as well.
You're welcome.
Let's see. So let's see, when did you last see your sister?
I was with her when she died in 1977 in New York.
The other friends of yours from the camps,
Yes. Unfortunately, the 5 girls, they all passed away. I was always the youngest, and I'm still around.
We have Do you have any thoughts on German government reparations and
Yeah,
um,
I do get my rent. As a matter of fact, when I was in the museum one day, happened to meet the president of Germany.
what was that experience like?
That's a strange feeling.
Thank you. Well, we have a lot of people typing in. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I have a couple of questions for you. We are approaching 4th of July weekend. Do you remember your first 4th of July that you celebrated in the United States?
Oh yes, I all the thunder reminded me of shooting, so I didn't really like the fireworks.
Thank you. Let's see. Um, we have a question here. It's a little bit of a personal one. So if you feel comfortable answering this, would you
Oh,
mind commenting a little bit about your faith today or how you feel about religion?
oh, when I was well enough, I was always a member of Sinai Temple, active. I am proud to be a Jew. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit afraid what's going on in the world, even here in the United States. Anti-Semitism is growing again, and it really scares me.
Thank you for sharing. Are you close with your sister's children or her offspring?
Unfortunately, her son committed suicide. He was a professor at Boise University. And her daughter lives in New Jersey, and of course I talked to her.
Thank you for sharing. We have one comment and then one final question. One of our audience members says, what you and your family have been through needs to remind us how grateful we should be for all of our blessings and how we get upset about such little insignificance.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
To conclude, you speak on a regular basis. I know to students and any group of audience actually, but I know you speak a lot at our museum to students. What would you like people to take away from learning your story?
First of all, young people, honor your parents. And when you see somebody saying something wrong or doing something, speak up. Tell them that that's not right.
Thank you so much again for sharing your story with us this afternoon, and thank you everybody for watching. We wish everybody a happy, healthy, and safe long weekend. And again, Angelina, thank you for everything you do for our community on a regular basis by helping the museum fulfill our mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations.
Right.
Mentioned again earlier, we are now open in person, so please visit our website to make a reservation to visit the museum. We look forward to seeing visitors in person and eventually survivor talks in person. We do not have a date for that yet, but you can come see the museum, and please stay posted for our virtual events, which we are still be doing throughout the summer on Zoom. Thank you, everybody. And Angelina, I hope to see you in person soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a happy 4th of July.
Thank you so much, Sally, for your assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful holiday with your family.
Thank you.
You too. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.